Hey, everybody. We have another interview here today with a very special guest and now one of my official teammates. And we are thrilled to have him on the team. Patrick Hart. He comes from a great background of facility management, facility stewardship, and a lot more credentials than I could actually share. So, Patrick, I'll pass it on to you if you want to just share a little bit about yourself, what you did before Smart Church Solutions, and what you're doing now with us.
Sure. I recently was the facilities manager at a church in the Everett, Washington area, just north of Seattle. For the past 14 years, I was on staff there. They have a large campus and a academy with over 1,000 students. So a lot of ministry opportunity, a lot of opportunity for things to break, a lot of opportunity to be fixing and maintaining and trying to be the best steward of that facility that I could over the last 14 years. During that time, I was elected to the board of directors of the National Association of Church Facilities Managers and served on the board for a little over 6 years. And that just, I found what an incredible organization that was to help me to be a better steward of what I was entrusted. So I was all in, sold out, and that's kind of how I met Tim Cool. And I don't think he would mind if I mentioned this, that I actually used the original facility space work order management system back in the day for a year, and it didn't work for me. It was just not. It did not work for our size of our organization or anything else. I went with another product, and I actually called Tim and told him, look, it's not working. And somehow we've maintained a relationship over the last 12 years. And at the point where I felt that God was leading me to do something different, kind of that maybe in my role as a facilities manager in a single setting, I had more to offer. And I felt like God was moving me to a new thing. And partly maybe that was through my leadership role at NACFM, and some of the things that exposed me to. My pastor actually said to me one day, "You wade in deep waters, and there's just no way that we can do service to what the interests and the gifts that you have in this setting." And so at that point, it was like very clear that he would be supportive of me, whatever I wanted to do. And so I stepped back, and Tim reached out to me and said, "Hey, let's talk." And a couple months later, here I am.
Awesome. Well, rewind back with me a little further. I guess what got you into facility management in the first place? And then to go a step further than that, what got you involved with church facility management kind of from the first place? Because
Wow. I'm going to throw my parents under the bus on that one. So my mom would say that it makes them look like like I grew up in a forced labor camp. But when I was 7, my parents had a rental home that they were trying to sell, and they needed to re-roof it. And so I remember being up on the roof with my dad, helping put shingles on a roof at 7 years old. And for the people that are worried about whether I would fall off, my dad actually tied a rope around my waist and the other end around the chimney, so I couldn't get anywhere near the edge of the roof.
OSHA would love that.
I know. And at the end of that time, he paid me $7, and I was incredulous. And he said, "I paid you everything you were worth." He said it was such conviction. And years later, I had kids, and he said, "Now you understand." But that was my first effort into doing anything maintenance and facility related. When I was in 3rd grade, we moved to another town, and kind of rural Wyoming, and to afford a house, we had elected to build a house from a kit, and it was delivered in a semi. And as kids, there's only 3 of us. I have a brother and a sister and my parents, and we unloaded. I think I had an uncle that came by and helped. We unloaded all this stuff out of a semi, and we paid paid framers to put the frame up. And after that, I learned plumbing, electrical, siding, roofing, flooring, you name it. It took us 10 years to finish that house before we sold it and moved out.
Wow.
But I learned all those trades as a young kid. It was just part of my life. My dad was a wood craftsman. He just loved to work in the garage and spend a lot of time doing that, and picked up some mechanic skills. And so that was the beginning of how I had interest in that.
So, and you built a house from scratch starting in third grade?
It was it
Just
was
to
a kit. It was
clarify.
like a
Okay.
Lego kit. Yeah.
Okay.
There was
That's
this nice
awesome.
little picture and a catalog. I mean, you're way too young to know this, but Sears used to sell kit homes way
Yep.
back in the day. And they were all these, the real craftsman home was a Sears home. And you just got instructions and you built it like it was a Lego model.
Yeah.
And my dad had kind of remembered that. And he just thought that was a really cool thing to do. And um, it was a great experience.
They still do those for those tiny homes I see. They'll sell you like an A-frame kit and things like that now.
Yeah,
I don't.
yeah. And this house actually did look like an A-frame. And I
Oh,
will tell you, you can never truly go home again. I drove past there a couple of years ago. It looks horrid. Somebody didn't follow up on the maintenance plan. So
that's awesome.
I can't drive back down that street. But that said, I grew up in a home that modeled stewardship and was a Christian home. We were at church. We participated in church. My parents volunteered on church committees. My dad was always seemed to be the treasurer or something in the different churches that they belonged to over the years. And so at the time I decided to go to college, I ended up attending Concordia University in this little town in Nebraska named Seward, just outside of Lincoln. And I started studying accounting, and I made it about a month into that. And I changed my major to what they call Director of Christian Education. And basically in the Lutheran church, that would be a youth minister. So I actually started out in ministry as a
Nice.
youth and family pastor in a variety of locations over the years. And that was very fulfilling. And my relation to facilities work in that was that I loved going on mission trips. And we would go and we would build a school in a little village outside of Tijuana, or we would go and build a church for those same people a year or two later, just pounding nails and being in fellowship and connecting with people over something that was so important to them. It was pretty cool. Love doing that.
Awesome.
I never thought that I would I'm going to do this as a living. Just never crossed my mind. Haven't met anybody yet that was like, hey, I want to be a facilities manager at a church.
Right. And that's kind of something I wanted to mention too, is like, it's almost like it's more of a calling than it is anything else, is being a facility manager for a church. Do you feel that same way, where it was a calling on your life at the time?
Yeah. I mean, if I look back, I can see that God had a plan all the way. I think anybody can look at their life, maybe, and if they're a believer, they're going to look back and go, oh, God did this and this, and he moved me in this way. And I picked up a variety of things along the way that would make me a good leader at that. I actually studied, worked on a master's degree in church administration.
Oh, wow.
Back in the day, which I thought was going to enhance my ministry as a director of Christian education. But as a facilities manager, what a blessing to have taken that years before to understand the dynamic of how to interrelate with the other pastoral staff and with your leadership, and you're not a leader that's out front, you're the leader in the second chair, and to understand that dynamic. And most folks that come into this don't have that going for them. The other piece of it is I really believe that church facilities managers are the modern day Levites. If you look back during the Exodus, the first ministry position was priest, and then facilities manager. And a really weird thing to think about is that the size of the tabernacle really wasn't all that big. I went to a scale size recreation of the tabernacle in Israel when I was there a couple of years ago, and it's surprisingly small. But there was over 5,000 Levites that took care of that area. They took care of everything. They made the garments, they made the tent stakes, they made the rope, they made the curtains that were hanging on the walls. They did everything. They took care of the sacrificial stands. They cleaned up after that. They did everything to support the ministry of the priests. And that's really what we do. And when people think about a church facilities manager, they think about, you're going to fix things that are broken. You're going to make sure things are clean. But there's really so much more to it. The little things that nobody understands, OSHA regulations, keeping up with code, checking 100,000 little things. It just the responsibility is great, and most people can't fathom what the depth of that. And yet, if anything goes wrong, you're the one that you're the target all of a sudden. And it's like, oh no, that didn't happen. How could we not have a heater cooling during the worship service? Or how could there be no toilet paper in that stall? And so there's so many things that are at play there. And in order to navigate that, you have to be very humble, not desire the upfront attention. We're very good about going in the background and hoping if everything's fine, we're good.
Right. Yeah. By the way, I can't get this mental picture out of my head now of you just hanging from a chimney at 7 years old on a rope.
Yeah. My mom can't either.
we need to document that or recreate that somehow. But
yeah, I don't know. I'm a little large now for that.
Part of what I was going to say in terms of that, though, is it sounds like you've been pretty self-motivated and driven to learn these little things and pieces as your life has progressed. I guess what my question is trying to go into is how have you, and how would you encourage somebody to kind of learn these kind of things of all? And what we kind of talked about the other day with Tim and Nathan was all the things a facility manager or a facilities team should really be doing that they're not. Like, how do they even go about figuring that stuff out that you've kind of created systems for, and that you've done a really good job at nailing down?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I had a period of time between when I was serving in the church as a youth pastor, and I left, and I had a variety of other things that I did. I started my own business teaching preschool science. Go figure. I don't even know how that happened. I was like, hey, would you teach preschool science? Oh, sure, I'll do that. And it was fun. It was great. And it didn't provide an adequate living for a guy with 4 kids, wife.
Right.
And I had worked for a telecom company. I was national account manager, and they went bankrupt. But that provided a whole nother set of skill and dynamic that I can understand the project management side of things from what I did there. So I mean, God kept putting things in my way that led to where I gathered a lot of that on my own. That to put me into facilities management, I was actually I was laid off after 9/11. Our company filed bankruptcy about a year later, and it was like everybody got laid off. And so I was like, what do I want to do? And I actually started attending a new church, new to us, and there was a facilities position open, and I thought, well, man, I could do that, just as a gap to fill in and make sure we had insurance. And I applied, and I didn't hear back for 6 months. And at that point, I was kind of stressing out, and I had a little conversation with God about how come I can't even get a job cleaning toilets. And then the phone rang. Hey, you want a job cleaning toilets? Literally. And I was like, wow. So I went in to interview, and the facilities director had been off because I think his son-in-law had been killed in a mountain climbing accident. So dealing with family stuff, he comes back and he's like, oh, we got this applicant still sitting here. Let's see what skills he has. And we started talking, and I told him the same thing I told you. I ripped a house at 7. I built a house in 3rd grade. And all of a sudden I'm on the facilities team, and I'm, cutting sheetrock and replacing doors, and like it wasn't long after that he retired, and my supervisor took his role, and my supervisor promoted me to supervisor. I'm like, wow, okay, there's something to this. And then a couple of years later, this position opened up where I was in Everett, which was a congregation that our church had started years before. And so it was an easy transition to go take it over. But at that point, my old boss said, hey, I found this organization, this NACFM thing. You should check it out. And my boss was on board. Went to training, and I gathered a lot more information about the actual role of facilities management it was like drinking from a fire hose. Kind of like the conversations we've had in the past, where it's just like, there's so much to this, and you kind of got to pick and sort through it. It's monumental. And somehow I guess with the combination of my experience and the things that I'd done in my life just made it easy for me to break all that down.
Yeah.
And even just within the working across the ministerial lines between the youth minister, children's minister, I'd done those roles. I knew exactly what they were thinking when they would come to me and say, "We want to land a helicopter on the soccer field," and I knew they weren't thinking about risk management, and they weren't thinking about damage to the
Doesn't
soccer
sound
field.
like it.
And it was like, "You're going to 1,000 kids in a helicopter landing," and they hold up. And so it it enabled me to kind of weave in and out of that stuff. And everybody's experience is going to be different, but I really believe you have to find people that are going to come alongside you and help you navigate these things. Because if you're trying to go it alone, it just you're going to be frustrated, and your church is going to be frustrated, and you're going to be inefficient. And I'm a stewardship wonk. My parents trained me well, and it frustrates me if I can't do something and be efficient and be a good steward. Good steward doesn't mean cheap. Don't cheap out and buy the cheapest stuff. Sometimes it's better to invest up front and get your payoff later. But it really just that's what it comes down to for me.
Yeah. So talk to me a little, you made a good point when I first met you in person at the Texas Ministry Conference,
Mhm.
kind of describing the difference between a professional facility manager versus, and I'll be kind and just say a non-professional facility manager in this kind of case.
Well, okay, there's one way I can look at it.
Sure.
There are people out there that work in a church. They're paid professionals, and their title may be facilities manager. What you may find out is that they're really a facilities maintenance worker. Their church gave them a title, and they're not managing anything. They're simply putting out the fires. They're fixing what's broken. There's no concern or regard for safety, OSHA, development of a deferred maintenance. Attacking your deferred maintenance. There's no plan for capital reserve or how you plan for failure of your equipment. There's no future planning. It's just simply, hey, what is your budget? How can we cut your budget? Wow, the electric bill just went up. The rates just went up, and you're handling that, but you're not managing it. You're just dealing with the day-to-day emergencies, and you become you're basically a wrench turner. And nothing wrong with that. I love turning wrenches, but somebody has to own it. Somebody has to be the person that sets that up and controls it, or the church is just going to be really poor at stewarding their facility.
Yeah.
There are other people who we discovered through our Facebook group
Yeah.
that there are a lot of people who are volunteers who are serving in some capacity, or they could actually be church staff people who their role is not that of a facilities manager, but they find themselves doing facilities management related tasks. They're tangential, and they struggle because they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And so they ask a lot of questions. It's like, hey, how do we do this? And some of them are really simple. Somebody joins in, and it's great to have that community that can interact. It doesn't always have to be some professional. It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be Nathan. It doesn't have to be Lee, or even
You don't want
Tim
me.
jumping in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's an e-space, you're the
There
guy.
you go.
So that is cool, and it's different for me because in my role at the NACFM, we were dealing with professionals, people who were facilities management people
Right.
in a role mostly paid. And so the level of questions was completely different. And our focus was on professional facilities ministers. So now I'm kind of like, this is kind of cool because you're just helping this the pool opened up. It's huge.
Yeah. And I think that kind of leads to a big problem that I want to ask you your opinion on. And the problem I see is that lack of knowledge, because two of the things you said make a really strong bridge here, where you're on your own as the facility manager, like you're on the background, really what you're doing is so behind the scenes, it's probably not even seen by executive pastors, lead pastors. It's not seen by anybody unless something goes wrong. And it's like, how can we educate executive pastors and lead pastors that you really do need somebody who's going to look behind the scenes, create a plan to attack deferred maintenance, create SOPs, and create what we need to do recurring for preventative side of things, and everything else that I frankly don't know. It's like, how can we educate those people, or how have you seen from your experience where you can kind of shine that light a little bit so they have that motivation to move the maintenance person from being a maintenance person to truly somebody who's being a manager kind of thing?
First, I would say that everybody that's a wrench turner, maintenance guy or gal is not always cut out to be the facilities manager. They don't necessarily have that giftedness or that calling. They want to fix stuff. So when I came to the church I was at, the facilities manager had started as a custodian, worked his way up, became a maintenance tech. The facilities manager that was there had worked at Boeing, and he had been laid off, and they hired him to be the church facilities manager. Well, then Boeing called him back, and he was like, you know what? That retirement plan looks good. So he went back, and they said, hey, let's give this other guy a shot at it. Well, they didn't give him any management training, and everybody on the facilities team was ready to quit. And he was frustrated, and they were frustrated. And so we happened to have an executive pastor who was really good and got it. And he was when he said, we need a real facilities manager. And that's when I came on board. Somebody who saw it as a ministry, somebody who was going to take these people under his wing. So there was a staff development piece of it. And I really gave this guy, I figured 6 weeks, he's going to dump some knowledge on me, and then he's out. Well, he stayed 6.5 years as my maintenance tech. And he only left because he couldn't afford, he got married and he couldn't afford insurance to add his wife onto our plan. We just couldn't balance it out.
Wow.
And so we're still friends, and it was a really cool thing to have him be there. And he'd be frustrated at how I handled things, and I'd take him to lunch, and then I'd say, okay, let him dump, and then I'd go, so whose problem is that? That's yours. I'm like, okay, great, let's move on. So that there's that piece of it. The other is having an executive pastor or a business administrator who gets it. I had both. I worked for the executive pastor, and when I came on board, our executive pastor, his name is Rob Cizik, wonderful guy. He understood, and where maybe the rest of the staff didn't understand what my role was, or like I first came on, and I got these invites in email to go to a staff retreat, and then I got the senior pastor took me aside and said, oh, don't pay attention to that. You don't come to that. We need you here. Okay. But well, all the rest of the staff, they went to the retreat, and they came back and said, where's Pat? Why isn't he here? He's a ministry leader. You keep calling him ministry leader. Why is he not on retreat with us? And from that point forward, I was at every retreat. They made a point of even juggling the dates to make sure I wasn't going to be gone and have some conflict. So that was cool. Having a guy who gets it.
There's a shift. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I hosted at NACFM conference, and he was asked to speak, and he said, "I'll only do it if we can do it, Pat and I together." And the response we got was amazing. People were coming to me saying, "How I wish I had that kind of relationship with my boss, who saw me at this level of importance in what I do."
Yeah.
Sadly, Rob passed away unexpectedly, and I went through a series of executive pastors who. They didn't understand the executive pastor role, nor did they understand my role. And so there was a struggle to rebuild that. So to answer your question, I think one of the things that the FCA helps us do is share with those at that executive level the real depth of what a facilities manager is covering.
Right.
They're finding out, and it's daunting. And many of them are going to need, if they don't already have a facilities manager, they're going to need to get one. Those who do have one are now have a new understanding of what that person is responsible for.
Right.
And to any executive pastors listening right now, give your facilities manager a seat at the table. They need to be at that level where they're heard. And it isn't that they're always going to get their way, but you've got to listen to what they're saying, because they're concerned about risk management. They're concerned about stewardship. They're concerned about safety. They're concerned about following the letter of the law. And you can't just always say, oh, we'll just ask forgiveness later. That's really not how I operated. Because if we operated that way all the time, we'd have injuries. It's not a safe way to go about doing a facilities role.
Right.
So yeah, give them a seat at the table. Give them an opportunity to share and ask their opinion. Don't
Yeah.
just, oh, hey, we're going to do this now. Make it happen. We're not just a delivery boy.
Yeah. So, and for those listeners who may not be aware of this, FCA is short for Facility Condition Assessment. So just to share that in case that one went over your head. But Patrick, so what is something, I think you gave a good piece of advice for executive pastors here to listen to. What is something you would tell a facility manager? And I'm going to put this two different ways. What would you tell a facility manager right now who is really just kind of a glorified maintenance person in the eyes of their executive team, or maybe even in the eyes of their self, that may not be ready for management? And then what would you also tell somebody who is a true facility manager, but may not be kind of seen that way of their church, or needs to have a different eye set, or whatever that may look like?
I think the first thing is get connected with others. Find out. You
Good.
have to have a place that you can share your frustration, and you can't just dump it at work. You can't dump it with your staff people. You have to be confident. You have to be a leader, and the leader is not going to be going in and saying, "Hey, I'm so frustrated at this," because then they become frustrated. So you got to have a place you can go that's safe. And that's a challenge. Some places there aren't anybody. I live in Seattle. There are not a lot of full-time church facilities managers around here. So I developed a group. I went around to churches, and I'm trying to find those people that we could gather with, or we could shoot emails, or we could have a quarterly or a monthly gathering, and it's varied over time. But it gave us the resource. So that, get connected with somebody. The other is have that conversation with your supervisor, whether that's your business administrator or your executive pastor, to just say, hey, I want to talk. Here's how I see my role. And even hang it back to the Levites. Rely on that ministry position and say, look, God had a plan there. God has a plan here. How do I fit in here? How can I see this as more of a ministry? And how can I help you see that as a ministry, so that we can both be better stewards of the organization? Because ultimately the executive pastor is really stewarding that staff and the organization. So
It's good. Well, I think we're getting close to the end here. Just for our listeners too, would you mind sharing a little bit about your hobbies, what you like to do outside of work right now? Even what you used to do outside of work as your life as a facility manager. I think we'd love to hear about that a little too.
wow. Well, I have 4 kids. They're all adults, and 4 grandkids, and we love family time. Love to spend. My grandkids are coming to visit tonight. Loving that. And outside of that, I haven't played in ages, but I enjoy hitting the golf course occasionally to smack the balls around. Not that I'm any good at it, but it's a fun way to spend your day. And I enjoy travel. In fact, I'm looking at my laptop. I have a picture in there. I took a trip a year ago. A year ago today, I was in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. I drove my car 6,000 miles round trip from Seattle to drive I want to say 11-mile stretch of road with 318 curves. I took a buddy, and we just made this road trip out of it. It was awesome. We stopped at national parks. We stopped every day, and we found, hey, where's the best barbecue place in Kansas City? And I'm kind of a foodie. So yeah, Facebook's been reminding me that last year I was on this really crazy vacation. Yeah, so enjoy that as well.
Awesome. And I'll kind of give you a second to shout out your what you used to be the president of. Is where should some facility stewards go to learn more about facility stewardship in general, how to take their facility management to the next level? What are some resources, some communities, or some groups that you might recommend to some of our listeners?
Well, we talked about the National Association of Church Facility Managers, NACFM. Definitely recommend that. If you're in a professional role, check it out. There's a national conference. There's chances for networking. There's local groups, depending on where you live, and trying to connect people as close to your local place as you can. There's a variety of conferences available. There's people join IFMA. If you're really about the facilities management stuff and not about the ministry side, IFMA is the place to go. IFMA offers certifications in a variety of things. National Association of Church Facility Managers offers a certified church facilities manager designation if you go through their training program, which is where you're really going to get the meat of that. And then there's other conferences you can go to, like Church Facilities Expo. That'll be in Dallas in October, where there's workshops and there's some facility stuff, and there's some technical and AV stuff, and there's leadership stuff. And then if you're lucky enough to have an XP who wants to be associated with the church network, which is really all about administrative role type church leaders, Church Network also offers a facilities track of sorts, and some vendors that may be of interest. And so that's another good place to plug in.
Isn't there a conference coming up in September that you're speaking at?
Oh yeah, there is. Yeah. What are we calling that one, Lee? We have a virtual conference, the Church Facility Management Conference, virtual, which the cool thing about that is that you can stay home or in your office. And if you get called away, which is going to happen, we're going to send out the link to the recordings. And so you're not going to miss anything by being at home, versus if you're going to go to these other places, you actually got to schedule travel time. You got to get there. You got to pay for it. So the cost can drive up pretty high. For those of you that think that that's a undoable ask, talk to your leadership and say, hey, what value do you place on me being a good steward? It really, it comes down, it's not that much money. I know we try to shortchange facilities, and I hope we don't shortchange your opportunity you have for a facilities manager to get some continuing education and some support and guidance.
Yeah. And I'll say too, our conference is $50. There's no excuse not to miss it.
Yeah. That one's
no travel, nothing. But anyway, Patrick, thank you so much for joining me. Any last words for our guests that you'd like to share before we hop off here?
No, just I'd say put God first. He's going to bless your efforts. It's a challenging job. When you run into trouble, that's when you get on your knees.
I love it.
Let's make sure invite God in to help you with that, or to lead you out of it.
It's awesome. Well, thank you so much, man. And I got to say, I'm so excited to have you on the team and have your leadership with us and your skills with facilities. It's such an honor. So thank you again for joining me today.
Thanks, Lee. It's been fun so far, and I'm really enjoying the it's a different change of pace for me. So it's an exciting time.
I love it. Well, we'll see you guys next time.